Well, hello again. Welcome to Chess Base Workshop. I'm Steve Lopez. Thanks for joining us today. We've been looking at, last time around, you'll remember this dialogue, in fact, from the last video. We've been looking at ways to play against Fritz to get a competitive game without getting crushed by playing against the software at full strength. Went through a whole major exegesis last time around about why that is important, and I don't want to go through all that again. Go back and watch that last video, and I'll tell you why it's important to get a competitive game without getting crushed. We looked at this dialogue. If you forgot how to get there, if you watched the last video, I'll give you a refresher. Go to the Training tab. You have different tabs at the top, of course. Go to the Training menu, the Training tab, select Handicap and Fun, and it brings up Happy the Clown there, and we have the ability to change the way the program plays the game of chess. We can tweak it around, which is fun. I've had a great deal of fun, by the way, with this dialogue over the years. I've had a real blast playing around with this. I've been able to get this program to play almost exactly like people from various chess clubs that I've belonged to who had very strange habits in their play. And we'll talk about some of them as we go. We talked about the playing strength slider last time around. You have other sliders here as well. King attack. How aggressively will the software go after your king when it plays? Okay. Minimal, it's not too worried about going right for the king. It'll play a little more obliquely, whereas maximum, it's just going to go full tilt right for it. Let's say you castle king side, it's going to go full tilt for that castle king's position. The converse of it is the king's defense, how much the software worries about defending its own king. You can slide this down to minimum. It's not going to worry about defending its own king very much. Maximum, it's going to play with a bunker mentality. It's going to worry about making sure that nothing can possibly happen to its own king. And these do interrelate in interesting ways. You want to have a real kind of a kamikaze approach. You can have maximum king attack and minimum king defense, or you can go the other way around. You could have maximum king defense, minimal king attack, in which case it'll play, as I said, with a bunker mentality. It doesn't want to do anything except defend. Different sliders can get you different results along the way. Just play around with it and find something cool that's fun to play against. Piece placement. What that basically means is trying to get your pieces to good squares. That's just a real basic tenet of chess. Fred Reinfeld talked about it a million times in his books. How important is it to the software? You've got a mid-range here where it's a little bit more flexible. In one case, it doesn't really care. You're going to find knights on the rim being very dim or grim or whatever else you want to rhyme up with it. On the other hand, you can go to maximum piece placement where it's not going to put a piece out there until it finds the exact perfect square that it should go on. Pawn structure. Minimal pawn structure concerns, it's going to double up its pawns, triple its pawns, backward pawns, all those things that Hans Koch talked about in his book, Pawn Power in Chess. He had all kinds of interesting names for all these good and bad pawn structures. Well, the bad ones, if you remember from Koch's book, that's what you'll see if you go with minimum. It'll do all the bad stuff. Maximum, it will try to avoid doubling its pawns at all costs. No backward pawns. It's going to try to get the absolute best pawn structure that it can. So you have a slider there. Remember, these are sliders. You can think in binary, ones and zeros, go for maximum or minimum, no matter what. But there's shades of gray in between. That's why sliders are more fun than radio buttons and toggles. Mobility kind of goes hand in hand with piece placement. Good piece placement tends to lead to good mobility. They're similar in that regard, but what the software will try to do, it controls how much your chess playing opponent is going, how much of an emphasis puts on mobility. Maximum, it's going to go for bishops on open diagonals, rooks, queens on open files and ranks. Queens on open diagonals, that kind of thing. If you go for, minimum, it's not going to worry too much about that, and you're going to have pieces tripping over each other. Center control, it's pretty obvious. Center control is kind of interesting because center control does not always mean center occupation. So don't think you're going to slide this to max and absolutely every time wind up with pawns on the E4 and D4 or E5 and D5. It will try to control the center, not necessarily occupy it. But again, it's a slider. How important does the program think that this particular concept is? Piece trading. Love this one. This one's fun. If you set it for minimum, that program is going to jealously guard all of its material like it's the Hope Diamond. It doesn't want to give up anything. Whereas if you go to maximum, it's going to trade, it's going to swap and barter. It's going to trade like a Moroccan rug merchant. It's going to go crazy, and it's going to, as we used to say back in the day, it will hoover the board. It will try to get as much off the board as I was going to say humanly possible, as digitally possible. And variety is just how much it varies up its play. Piece play over here, this is a good one. I used to have a great deal of fun with this one. I used to play a guy years ago, many years ago, that in the first 7 moves of any of his games, 5 of them will be pawn moves. Because he just didn't really know what to do. He wasn't sure where to put his pieces, so he'd move his pawns. So you could set this for pawn, crank this up toward max, and the next thing you know, your software is going to be making a lot of pawn moves, and it's going to prefer moving its pawns or capturing with its pawns over moving or capturing with other pieces. And you can set this for more than one toggle. Queens and pawns, for example. You get players like this, particularly beginners, where they move their pawns out, and the next thing the queen comes out. And the queen's just pinballing all over the board, trying to create as much havoc as possible. So you could set it for queen and pawn, move this up toward max, and you're going to see a lot of queen moves and pawn moves. So you just have a real good time with that. I've had a lot of fun with this particular part of the dialogue over the years, because I do have friends that they're just in love with a certain piece, and they just like to move that piece around or use it as much as possible. One thing we have not covered, though, we need to go back up to the top for it, and that is blunder range. This controls how much material the program will be willing to sacrifice to make all these other things possible. So what that basically means is, for example, if the only thing that you set in this dialogue, the only thing that you touch is piece play, let's say the queen and pawn, and we'll crank this up a bit, how much material is the software going to be willing to sacrifice to make this happen? Well, for example, we can bump it up, somewhere in this ballpark up here. And it'll probably give away a minor piece to make these things occur that we see down here. It's a slider that lets you basically control how much material, from no material the whole way up to a queen and a pawn or 10 pawns, how much it's willing to throw out to try to make the other criteria that you set occur. So that's another little tweak. Now, this will do all kinds of odd things, and you may play with it for a while before you find some settings that you really like. There are, however, some presets. Notice I just clicked the default button and everything jumped back to where it was. You've got different characters, which, by the way, some of them have rather demeaning names. Excuse me, just had a sip of coffee there. Careless. Click on careless, and what do we see? It'll give up 4 pawns to really go nuts over a king attack, not worry too much about its piece placement, not worry about its mobility very much. It's not going to trade pieces, not going to worry about the center very much. So that's what it does, and it's going to move its kings and pawns an awful lot. Click on moron. There's words here. If you call somebody this at a chess club, there'd be a fist fight. Hey, moron. Hey, careless. Or, hey, of course, the ever-popular, you're a potzer. You go to moron, you see I'm not going to go through all of this, but you click on moron, and there's a bunch of different settings here for, where it changes. Go for potzer, and again, we have a different setting tit for tat. And what you're going to see is a lot of piece trading, which was predictable from that name, etc. You can just click on different ones. You can click on the misspelled assassin, and it's going to go for maximum king attack, which is pretty cool, and queen and knight for piece play. That's actually very clever. Whoever thought these settings up was actually pretty good, because that's exactly what happens is you have these, this huge attack on the king side where a queen and a knight combine to deliver checkmate. You see it in chess problems all the time. So if you don't want to tweak these yourself, you've got a suite of characters that you can set up and play against just by clicking, and you can just have different modes of play. And of course, if you're ever tweaking around and you don't like what you come up with, simply click defaults, and it just goes back to its normal neutral setting. You can have a ton of fun with this. Trust me, I've done it. I've had a great amount of fun just playing with sliders and playing games against Fritz. And I encourage you to play around with this. It's a lot of fun. It's one of the most fun things you could do in this program to play around with. Next time around, though, we're going to look at a different handicap mode. It's not called handicap, it's called something else. But another mode of play in which you can play against Fritz or Ribka, whatever version of the software that you're using, and not get crushed by the software playing at full strength. We'll look at that next time in Chess Base Workshop. Until then, please do have fun.